Innate immune system.
Innate immune system.
Y'all got your books? We're doing 33.3 tonight. It's only one section.
Woo. Is it like innate here?
Nope, it's just one reading section.
12 pages.
Not even very long. 2-3 pages. There's all types of innate immune stuff that you're born with. Like I said yesterday, your skin can block things from getting in your body. Your mucous membrane is made to trap organisms floating around in the air so they don't get down deep into your lungs and such. You have little hairs lining your airways that trap organisms. You have salt that's excreted by your sweat glands that tends to kill harmful bacteria that can't tolerate it, and so forth. These are all innate immune characteristics that you have. So that's the barriers to entry. You have protective proteins that are made by the body. One type is called complement proteins and interferons. I think those are two types. And we're going to talk about those in a little bit. Special proteins that are made that can attach to invading cells and help kill them. And they're floating around inside your bloodstream right now.
Are they the same thing? Just two different names?
They do two different things. Complement and interferons do different things. And I'll talk about those. You have cells crawling around in your bloodstream called phagocytes, and others called natural killer cells. You know why they're called phagocytes? That always gets a giggle.
Like phagocytosis?
Phagocytosis, very good, EKM.
Wow.
They envelop and devour and swallow things, and that's called phagocytosis. So, and they're white blood cells, and they crawl around in your blood, and they do that. There are also special types of cells called natural killer cells, NKC, and they crawl around, and they have receptors, protein receptors on the surface of their cells. They're like amoebas, and when that receptor sticks to a special type of protein that's on the outside of all of your cells, then that amoeboid cell recognizes that your cell belongs there. And if it crawls over something and it doesn't find any of those special proteins, it'll engulf the thing and kill it. It figures it doesn't belong. Now, those special proteins that natural killer cells look for have a name. They're called MHC1 proteins. Yeah.
Does MHC stand for anything?
MHC stands for Major Histocompatibility Complex. And basically what it is, it's just on the surface of one of your cells, there'll be proteins. Y'all know what proteins are, right?
String of amino acids.
There you go. How many times have I brought out that amino acids?
Don't do it.
We need a counter. And anyway, there they are, you see. And so this white blood cell that creeps along here that kind of is shaped like an amoeba, it feels for these. It has receptors on its surface that are shaped in such a way that they'll lock onto these. This is a natural killer cell. And if it locks on, it won't kill the cell because it belongs to you. These are the MHC proteins. But if it doesn't lock on, it'll kill the thing.
Is there some sort of disease where, like, a virus could change white blood cells to start eating your good cells?
Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, it's usually not caused by a virus, it's caused by a mutation. And all of a sudden, your white blood cells start killing your own cells. And that's a bad disease to have. It has a name that I can't think of. It's a autoimmune reaction, is what you call it. An autoimmune disorder. And there's not much you can do for the person. You can give them drugs that'll keep their white blood cells from being active. But can you see the problem with that?
Yeah.
Then you're going to get whatever disease comes in. So,
what's the point then connecting if it doesn't kill it?
because that's the way it knows that this is one of your cells.
It's a good cell.
Does it like disconnect once it's alive?
Yes, it connects, says okay, you're okay, and then disconnects.
It's like a
That make
police.
sense?
Look at this
Transplants are
But
often
that
hard
one-
because the proteins don't match.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that too. That's right. If you have a non-matching protein here, if this thing's some other shape, this wouldn't connect to it. I guess all of them would be like that. That's why a transplant doesn't work very well. You see, so you have to get a matching donor that has the same MHC1 proteins as you do. Does that make sense?
If that was on the right, like a virus or something, and it attached to it, would it kill it?
Yeah, it would kill it because it doesn't match up. So this thing would kill it if that's a virus. If that's one of your cells, it wouldn't kill it. Make sense?
What if your cell has a virus though?
Well, now viruses are real small, and they're on the inside of cells. And that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. So a virus might be real small inside the cell multiplying and then bursting out. So we're going to talk about how the body can deal with that. But if it's just floating around here and this thing catches it, it's not going to have your MHC1 complexes, and it's going to try and kill it.
Is that like the lytic and lysogenic thing?
The lytic and lysogenic cycle describes
when it
how
comes out.
viruses reproduce. So a virus can enter a cell and start multiplying and become hundreds of viruses inside this cell, and then the cell bursts open and the viruses exit. That's the lytic cycle.
But will the white blood cell know that there's viruses inside that cell?
If it runs in, will it know that there are viruses inside the cell? There's a way of it figuring that out, which I'm going to talk about tomorrow.
Okay.
The cell can actually put viral proteins on the outside, which indicate it that there's viruses in there. Let's talk about inflammation. You ever have inflammation? Swelling?
Motrin.
If somebody hits you in the head with a bat, you get a big bump on your head, right? Or a frying pan, or anything else they might hit you in the head. So how does that work? Well, here's a case it shows right here where the skin has been broken. This is the skin up here. And you can see it's been broken right there. And maybe somebody got stuck with a knife. So the skin is broken here. And here are your tissues underneath the skin. And there are special cells called mast cells that lie within all the tissues of your body. Everywhere in your body you have these mast cells. And they're just sitting there, waiting for injury. And when they sense injury, the injury is nearby, and this one can somehow sense it. And I'm not sure how, but when it senses the injury, it'll start squirting out a chemical called histamine. Histamine is a chemical that promotes swelling. And those are the little histamine molecules, and it just starts dumping them out. And the histamine molecules have multiple effects. One of the things the histamine molecule will do...
Like antihistamine? Oh.
Yeah, antihistamine, you ever heard of that?
Like
Works
Benadryl.
against
yeah.
histamine.
That's awesome.
One of the things that the histamine will do is the histamine will cause muscles that are wrapped around the blood vessels to relax and dilate. Y'all know what that means, dilate? Become bigger. All of your blood vessels have muscles wrapped around them that squeeze it and can squeeze it completely shut. But the no, wait, I got that. I'm sorry, I got that backwards. Okay, I'm sorry. Ignore what I just said. I'm screwing up here. The histamine causes the walls of the blood vessels to become leaky. Okay? And fluid leaks out of the blood vessels.
Walls of the blood what?
The walls of these blood vessels will become leaky. That's what the histamine does. I was thinking of something else.
Fluid meaning blood?
Well, blood consists of blood cells, but it also consists of a lot of liquid, like water and salts and sugars and things. It's what we call plasma, the blood plasma. And what will happen is a lot of the fluid, not the cells themselves, but the fluid will leak out. And the whole area will swell up with fluid. And the fluid that comes out of the blood is hot. It's warm. Your blood is kept warm by the body.
Is that why when you have like a brain injury and they have to like drill holes in your head to like release the stuff?
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, that fluid, your skull doesn't stretch. Emery, your skull can't stretch, so the fluid can build up underneath it.
Yeah.
If you drill a hole, it lets the fluid out. So the fluid will leak out of here, and it has there's several things that happen when the fluid leaks out. The area gets warm because of all this warm blood fluid that's coming out, this warm blood plasma. And the high temperature helps kill bacteria. The green things you see here are bacteria that are roaming around the area that came in with the knife wound. When that guy you thought would be a fun date stabs you. I come up with crazy scenarios. That would never happen. Go out with anyone you meet on the internet.
Oh my God.
Anyway, so all these bacteria come in from the wound site, and they're killed by the hot temperature. That's one thing that happens. Another thing that happens, there are nerves in the area that become squeezed by all this pressure. All this fluid building up in the area where you were stabbed squeezes little nerve endings that start sending pain signals to the brain, so it makes the area really hurt. Areas that are swollen often hurt really bad. You ever notice that?
Yes.
And that makes you consciously protect the area from further injury. You don't want anyone, don't mess with it, it hurts. And your mom says, let me see. And you go, So histamine has that effect. Now, I wasn't lying. There are muscles around these blood vessels that are on either side of the capillary, and they will actually squeeze shut to keep too much blood from. If the blood vessel is completely broken, you don't want to lose too much blood. You don't want to bleed to death. So for a while, you'll close off the capillary so the blood cells can't get through too much.
I've got a question.
But that relaxes after a while. It's only temporary.
If it's squeezed shut and your heart's going to, where does that blood go once it gets to the area that's shut off?
It'll just not even go through that capillary. See, the capillaries come off of larger vessels.
Oh, okay.
So it's like a river here where the blood's going, and then the capillary shoots off from it. So if you squeeze off that capillary, it just doesn't go through it. Yeah.
You know how you can like see not nerves, veins. Like if you like squeeze your skin around it, does it do anything?
I don't know.
Try it.
I am.
Don't squeeze it too hard.
Nothing's happening.
Oh, you feel your pulse, right? Right.
Well, the pulse is in arteries, not veins.
Yeah.
Veins have a much lower pressure. Arteries.
Oh yeah, I can feel it.
Because artery is near the beating of the heart. Veins are very far away. Another thing histamine does is it attracts white blood cells. And white blood cells come in and they go toward the histamine. And here are some, and they could actually squeeze through a little opening between cells of a blood vessel, of a capillary, and go out here and start eating the bacteria. These green things are bacteria that have come in with the wound. And there are special types of white blood cells called monocytes. That's one right there. And the monocyte is what we call the traveling form that just floats around in the blood vessel. And when it crawls out, it will the monocyte will change into either a neutrophil or a macrophage.
What do those do? Just kill the bad bacteria?
They eat the bacteria.
Is there a difference between the neutrophil and the macrophage?
Macrophages are larger. And we're going to talk more about macrophages tomorrow.
What's the one with little arms? Kind of pulling them in.
I'm sorry. The monocytes become macrophages or dendritic cells. Both of those eat
Can you say it again?
These monocytes crawl out of the blood and will become macrophages or dendritic cells. Macrophages are kind of found everywhere in the body. Dendritic cells tend to be found mostly in the area of the skin. A neutrophil is another type of white blood cell that will crawl into tissues and eat bacteria. So, neutrophils, dendritic cells, macrophages, monocytes, they're all white blood cells that can contribute to eating and killing bacteria. And they just kind of vary in the way they look and how they eat the bacteria. But they all do basically the same thing.
Why are there so many types?
People have been studying these for hundreds of years and just noticed that they come in different types. If people came and studied humans, they'd say, well, there's the teenager and there's the adult, there's the policeman, and they'd say it's just a bunch of humans. That's kind of like...
So they're all white blood cells that...
There are all types of white blood cells that will crawl out and eat invading bacteria.
What do they crawl out of?
Out of the blood vessel. See, this is the blood vessel here. And see, it's kind of squeezing its way out.
Mm-hmm.
The monocyte actually becomes these two. And the neutrophil is a separate entity on its own. And these cells will multiply and multiply, and you get a whole bunch of white blood cells in the area. And the white blood cell, after eating enough bacteria, will die. And then you'll have a bunch of you'll have a bunch of dead white blood cells in the area. And you can see it kind of oozing out of cuts and stuff sometimes. It's called pus.
Those are white blood
Those
cells?
are dead white blood cells, and sometimes some living white blood cells too. And a bunch of debris and junk from the cut all kind of mixed together.
That only happens when the cut's getting better.
Yes, pus is a sign that your body is in a fight. And the white blood cells are multiplying. It usually would be a good sign. Means you're fighting, trying to get better. It can build up under the skin. Sometimes the fight goes on under the skin. That's what a pimple is. It's a bunch of white blood cells fighting bacteria under your skin, and it swells up, and that's the pimple. The white stuff in a pimple is pus. Isn't that gross? I'll say it again, pus.
So when you pop a pimple, you're squeezing out your white blood cells.
There's an actual picture of a white blood cell and a bunch of bacteria, and this thing is trying to eat them, you see.
Do we see blood cells under our microscopes?
Yeah, they're very small. I can show you the slides with them. We do that in anatomy.
Does the white blood cell
cut
consume a
themselves.
certain amount of bacteria before it explodes or dies?
Yeah, different white blood cells can eat more or less. I think the macrophages can eat the most. Depends on their size and how toxic the bacteria are and other things. Sometimes when you break down a bacterium, some of the contents are poisonous, and so just like eat too much of a bad thing, it can hurt you. Okay, I told you I was going to talk about complement. Complement are proteins that are made of, the liver makes a lot of these proteins. And the proteins are just floating around in the blood. And here's a bacterium. And the bacterium, as it's floating around inside your body, can collect these complement proteins. The complement proteins stick to the bacterial cell wall in such a way that they create a hole. Complement proteins form a donut-like ring called a membrane attack complex in the plasma membrane. So here we go. This thing is attached and forms a hole. And that causes, and water will rush into the hole and cause the bacterium to explode. And so just a bacteria, it just happens to find its way into your bloodstream. Bacteria are tiny, so they can get through all kinds of cracks and crevices and cuts and things. Floating around in your blood long enough, it'll just explode from the complement attack.
What's the hole called?
I just call it a hole.
You said complex or something.
Well, the complex are many of these proteins together form a protein complex. Like, complex means
So what is
complicated, many things.
complement proteins are just floating around in your.
They're just floating around in the blood, and they'll attach to a foreign invader like a bacteria and end up killing it.
So it's attached to the bacteria and then forms a hole. And the water goes into the hole and bursts.
This is a bad joke, but they're being killed with kindness.
Compliments.
Bad joke.
Very nice.
You're
Bad
right.
joke. Look out. Bad joke.
They call it complement because it complements
That's a really
the
good joke,
immune
though.
system. Complement means to help,
I wouldn't think of that.
and the immune system is helped out by these proteins. So they originally called them complement proteins. That make sense?
These vegetable fats.
One more thing.
I used to
Another thing that can happen, a cell can release a protein called interferon. Let me go back here. They show you this word right here. Complement proteins and interferons. When a cell gets invaded by a virus, here's just a normal cell. Here's some cells in your skin somewhere. They're kind of, sometimes they're kind of cube-shaped, or a cell in your kidneys or something like that. Might be a cube-shaped epithelium. Let's say it gets invaded by a virus. And inside the cell, the virus starts multiplying. This cell can do something to protect itself. Actually, not to protect itself, but to protect the body. The cell, while this virus is multiplying inside it, can release special proteins called interferons. And these interferon proteins will be absorbed by nearby cells and taken in. And it tells the cell to not take in anything for a while. It tells the cell you have a virus around that's going to be an invader, and so to stop pulling things in. Because the way viruses usually get into cells is the virus locks on to a protein at the surface. Here's a surface protein. The virus, you see, will lock onto that protein, and then the cell, when those things latch together, the cell will engulf it and pull that thing in. Will make a little vesicle that pulls in the virus. And normally, see, the cell's thinking that virus is something good that it actually needs, when actually the virus is something bad that it doesn't need. So, interferon is a protein that tells nearby cells not to take anything in for a while.
It's the red
And
dot.
how it
for
does
virus.
that, I'm not sure. But somehow it keeps viruses from entering other cells that collect the interferon. So interferon is another protein that can help the immune system react against viruses. But the number one way that viruses and bacteria can be killed are by using your B cells and your T cells. And those are part of the adaptive immune response.
Don't those go in the spleen?
which we're going to talk about tomorrow. The adaptive response uses B cells and T cells to react and kill. And it's a very long, involved process that takes about 40 minutes to explain.
Oh.
Great.
I'm going to do that tomorrow.
There's a sound. How does the body fight infections in the brain?
Who takes really good notes?
Perks of being a cheerleader. I think we're the only ones that take notes.
Does the brain have the same kind of access to white blood cells?
No, it doesn't. The brain has a barrier called the brain. The brain has a way of filtering things out. It's called the blood-brain barrier.
Yeah.
And white
I'll
blood
watch
cells
it in the hotel
cannot
room.
get into the brain as easily. So the brain has its own cells that are there and kind of stuck there that help fight infection for it.
Yeah.
So it's got its own
Yeah.
types of white blood cells roam around the
To
brain.
show that the white
Yeah,
blood
it's on
cells
home.
society about
Yeah.
the viruses and the parasites. Talk about when it gets in the brain.
Moots and
The
boots.
brain can't do a whole lot because there's not as many white blood cells, and so it just swells up.
Yeah,
That's what kind of the problem
that's
is.
correct. That's correct. There are cells from the blood, from the brain that can fight,
Yeah.
and they have their own names and types. We talk about that some in anatomy too. Now I got one more thing I want to show y'all. You can turn that off, yeah.